Number Days Collective.
This is Take Two.
Andy Quinn, how are you doing?
I'm not too bad. I found my way here okay, so that's always a plus.
Yeah.
I'm doing good.
We had a nice little chit chat.
Yes, we did. Yeah. Well, we had to break the ice a little bit. So but it's always really nice meeting new people, especially after the last 2 years. Everything's been so different and weird. I mean, even the guy who was cutting my hair today, he was just going to say, "This is as close to normal we're going to get in a while." And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I'm going off to do a podcast." And he's like, "It's so cool." I was like, "I can't imagine doing that a year ago." I was like, everything was so locked down, still very isolated, I think, for a lot of people. So yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good overall.
Like really
How am I doing? It's funny when I kind of think about this quite a lot when I compare myself to, say, this month last year. And I was kind of still unbeknownst to myself, grieving for who I used to be, the Andy before the stroke. I'm doing a hell of a lot better than that Andy 12 months ago. But there's days where, I'm still kind of like, where am I going? And when will I be able to get there?
Okay.
Yeah, but people do say to me an awful lot, and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, because then you're kind of thinking, okay, it's going to take ages. You know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I'm like, yeah, but I'd like to sprint. I'd like to get there quicker.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Time is only, it's finite. It's not infinite.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm doing a hell of a lot better than I was, but I have a long way to go.
Glad to hear that. Who was Andy before the stroke?
Oh, Andy before the stroke was really outgoing in the sense his social life. He had his own mental health issues that he didn't realize he really had. He lived in the city, loved living in the city, couldn't see anything else other than living in the city. Loved his dog, loved his boyfriend. He was in college. He was studying to do engineering. Before that, he was in accountancy. Didn't really like that. Didn't think that was going to be the career for him for life. Still likes numbers. I really do still like numbers, love stats, love numbers.
Teach me, boy.
I love numbers. I think that's where the engineering thing came from. It's just an interest I've always had. I know it sounds terrible, but I always loved, like, why did that plane fall out of the sky? So I love those documentaries.
Okay.
Yeah, I adore those documentaries. Like, okay, what happened? What went wrong there? So, yeah, Andy before the stroke was not perfect, far from it. But he was a normal 28-year-old, relatively normal, with issues like everybody else. But he was walking down the street. I think Andy would have just blended in fine. Like, yeah, totally. Yeah, Andy was
Probably oblivious to what was going to happen.
Yeah, totally oblivious. Totally oblivious. I didn't think in a month of Sundays that it was going to be me. And that's such a cliche. Everyone says that. No one ever thinks it's going to happen to you until it does. But it was me. And I guess that was traumatic in itself.
Yeah.
Because it came out of nowhere, like a bit like a train. It came out of nowhere.
So, like, we're going to, like, tap into it. Like, that's going to be my next question. But usually sometimes when it comes to, like, strokes and that sort of thing, people usually ask, what were you doing before? You know? But I think it was just, it was bound to happen.
I mean, if you go back to that year, if you go back to 2020, it was June. My birthday had been 6 days before. I just turned 28 on the 2nd of June. I had a niece who was born a few days later. So, you know, everything was great. And I think we hopped on the bandwagon of, let's do some decorating. It's COVID, it's lockdown. And that's all. I think it's all people could do.
It was lockdown 1.
Yeah, I think we were still very much in the middle of that. Yeah. So we went out and we got some paint. We said we're going to top up the wall had been chipped and stuff. We're going to just clean up the wall. And I'd set my sight in this corner of the apartment where I'd just been dumping stuff. I was like, I'm going to deal with that corner. And I brought out my gaming desk. I cleaned behind everything. I was touching up the paint from where I'd been, as Connor says, hawking the desk off the wall. And yeah, like that evening was absolutely fine. I even did some gaming.
Yeah.
I sat on the computer and was happy, and there was nothing wrong with vision, no headache, nothing. Everything was kind of as was. We had dinner, went to bed, And then the next day, everything changed completely. Yeah.
So that day is June 8th, 2020.
June 8th, 2020.
6 a.m.
6 a.m.
What happened?
Weirdly enough, it was the dog that woke me up, Charlie.
Go on, Charlie. Good job.
At the time, we were about 7 floors up, so not ideal for a chihuahua to use the toilet on the regular. Small dog, small bladder. So Charlie was actually litter trained. But because we had housemates, obviously you couldn't just leave bedroom doors open. So what Charlie do is he'd wake me up, always me, to look to go to the toilet. So Charlie woke me up. I opened up the bedroom door and I kind of thought, I'll take this opportunity to go to the toilet. And I went into the bathroom and I went to the toilet and that was fine. I was washing my hands. And I remember kind of being distinctly aware of my face. I was kind of, looking in the mirror. So there's something not entirely right. And I just was like, what's going on? I didn't really think too much of it. Went back to the bed. And then I couldn't get comfortable. I was just like, I can't lie on this side. And this is the side I like to lie on. I couldn't lie on my right side. So I got back up, went back into the bathroom and looked back in the mirror and I said, there's actually something not right with my face because it had started to droop already. I couldn't smile. That was the other thing. I knew that myself. That was gone. That was the first sign to me. Then by the time I got back to the bed, I'd say a distance of 10 foot, my balance and my physical strength had started completely to go. The vision came next. Everything was double blurred. I managed to get back into the bed and I knew in my heart, I knew I was having a stroke. And that's what I shouted. I was like, call an ambulance, I'm having a stroke. And of course he woke up, Connor, and he didn't really 28 having a stroke. And he came shooting across the bed. And the first thing he asked me to do was smile. And when I couldn't smile, he knew that he knew as well. And my speech then was the next thing. Started to not slur straight away. The vocal cord changed. I was high pitched. I just didn't sound like myself.
Okay.
And then I lay back down in bed while Connor called an ambulance and said, my boyfriend, 28 and he's having a stroke.
Yeah.
He stayed on the ambulance, obviously, on the phone until the ambulance arrived. And that then was the next kind of traumatic part of the whole situation because they were in disbelief too. They were, it's a 28-year-old.
That's part of your story that really fascinated me.
Yeah.
Is that the paramedics thought did they think you were on drugs or something?
They thought drugs. They thought Bell's palsy. But they refused initially for about 5, 6, 7 minutes of arguing to believe that it was a stroke.
And with every second during a stroke, you lose brain function.
Exactly. So every 59 seconds, it's 2 million brain cells die. And countless length of brain, tissue as well alongside it. Like you just can't comprehend.
Do you remember feeling anything in that moment in time?
I remember. What I remember is Connor. I suppose he came across as belligerent because he was, he's having a stroke. And they were so casual. I'm thinking the whole thing was ridiculous. I'll tell you what I remember.
Tell me.
And it was so silly. I packed a bag while he went downstairs. Our apartment was over 2 floors, and he went downstairs waiting for them. Then he had to go down to the main. And from where my bed was, I could just about reach a bag and whatever. And that's what I was doing. I was more focused on is the bag, phone charger. But I knew I wasn't going to be out in a day. I knew that already. That's what I was focused on. And then it just became ridiculous, and I became angry. Especially when the paramedics were kind of not willing to, a stroke's supposed to be put through as a fast call straight away, really straight away. They tried to get me to walk down the stairs of our apartment, never mind the main building itself. And it was just, the whole thing was ridiculous. We were kind of no. They were probably about 4 or 5 minutes getting the wheelchair, the carrier chair from so I started to get this is ridiculous. Because of COVID, they did the bloods and put the cannula in the ambulance, and they were trying to make chit chat with me, and I was kind of
move.
Yeah, I was get
going.
And the last part of that whole thing that I remember really was that the driver shouted into the paramedic, or in the back of me, he says, "I'm putting this through as a fast call. Is that all right?" And I was kind of it's been a fast call from the moment stroke was mentioned.
My God.
In my mind, that's what I thought. And And when I got to the Mater A&E, it was brought straight to resus. They did not treat it as anything other than a stroke. It was a stroke in their mind. They knew, but it was kind of very scary that the paramedics didn't see it. They didn't see the balance. They didn't see the issue with the eyes. Fair enough, I couldn't smile, so that's where they got the Bell's palsy thing from. And my speech wasn't slurred, but they didn't recognize the balance or the eyes as two pretty big symptoms of a stroke. And when you put that together with the face, speech, the change in speech, it's all there. If you know.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
And you are pushing for, so whoever is listening or watching, everyone knows that it's usually the FOST.
In Ireland, unfortunately, I mean, it seems to be the campaign that's pushed quite a bit, the national campaign, which stands for Face, Arm, Speech, and then Time to Act. In various other first world, second, third, whatever around the world countries, BFAST is used.
And it's been around since 2014.
Well, exactly. And it is recognised by neurologists, stroke consultants all around the world that the balance and the eyes are two major indicators of a stroke. Not just that. They're two major indicators of a transient ischemic attack, which is kind of like what people call a mini stroke.
Okay.
But that's a warning, a massive warning that a big stroke event is about to take place. So when people don't recognize BFAST, the balance on the eyes, they think, oh, something wrong with my vision, or, I'm not feeling 100% right, or I don't know what it is. And that might only last for, 3 or 4 minutes and they pass it off. But the balance on the eyes, that's a really big part of it. Really big part of it, especially an ischemic type of stroke, which accounts for 80+% of strokes in Ireland in 2020, according to the Irish National Audit of Strokes. So, yeah, that's why I'm pushing it. I think it's really important.
And how do you feel now that it's nearly 2 years? Looking back on the paramedic situation, how do you feel about that?
So, last year I was really angry still. When we moved, I had time to think and focus. Not that there were long days by myself. I wouldn't say that. Connor's out at work. But I definitely had time to think about things. Thankfully, somebody in rehabilitation had the foresight to refer me to a psychologist. And I'd say within a week of moving, I got a letter to say, a phone call, I think it was actually, this, you're going to, no, do you know what it was? I'm totally wrong. Before we had left in March, early March, I was assessed in person with a psychologist. I'd agreed to do that, even though COVID was still rampant, but I thought that was important. And they said, look, we'll get back to you and see what the story is. And then we'd moved, and a week later I got a phone call, and they were like, look, we actually really do think, there's something that we can do for you and that you should do it. And it was 3 months working with a psychologist on how to deal with all sorts of things. But I didn't really realize I had so much going on. I didn't see that. Like, there are some earlier videos, especially on TikTok, where, I think I accepted the fact that I was really upset that I was never going to be the Andy before the stroke, that things had changed. And that was just that. I know I found that tough, but what I didn't realize was that I was grieving, angry, traumatized, and I felt really vulnerable. Like, one of the things we figured out really quickly was the reason why I was having so many arguments in the car with Connor is because I was a passenger, and I all of a sudden felt the fragility of what can happen in the blink of an eye. Yeah. And the most of our arguments happened we were having big arguments in the car. And she was saying it's because you're not in control. Someone else is literally driving, and you feel that vulnerability more than you ever did before.
It's kind of like a PTSD thing.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I avoided before we left Dublin. I put on a serious amount of weight after I left rehabilitation. In rehabilitation, I put on about 5 kilos, and then I put on another 7 before we left Dublin, purely because I did not want to walk around. I felt unsafe.
Wow.
I felt so unsafe. Someone might knock me over. I'd say I could probably count on one hand the amount of walks we did over winter of that year. So yeah, it was, the apartment had become this. My older brother called it a concrete prison. It had become a concrete prison, most definitely to me. So yeah, last year I didn't realize that I had all these things going on, and it wasn't until Kathy Boyle, that was my psychologist, brilliant. She said, look, what are the issues? What's going on? What happened this week? And she's like, okay, let's talk about that. Why did that happen? Kind of like, I don't really know. And she was really good at trying to say, well, maybe it was because of X, Y, and Z. But the other issue with, the big goal for me leaving rehabilitation was I wanted to walk. They asked me, what's the goal? Everyone gets asked, what's the goal? There's a sheet you fill in for the first week, which is so frustrating when you get to rehabilitation. Well, for me anyway, it was, they just say, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to observe you. There will be some physio, whatever, but it's just more exercise than that now. So we're not actually going to set up a plan or tell you how long you're going to be here for or what's going to happen, because we need to see what way you are. So for a week, they observed you. And you're kind of thinking, I just want to get on with this. I want to know more, whatever, blah, blah, blah. When they're done observing you, they fill out, a form, and you're part of the process 100%, which is really important, especially during COVID when family can't be part of that physical process. So the goal I had, and it's on the discharge report, is that I wanted to walk the dog again. And my physiotherapist, she made sure, she was panicking. She said, how am I going to replicate you walking a dog? I was like, it's a 3 kilo chihuahua. I was like, you don't need to worry about that.
I need to walk, and the dog will follow.
Yeah, exactly. So she's like, oh my God, it's a chihuahua. She's like, we don't need to even figure that out. Let's just get you walking.
Yeah.
So, so when we got me, she got me to that goal. Like I did within the last week of leaving, we reckoned I'd done a 1.5 kilometer walk with her, because at the time I'd got the Samsung smartwatch, and I was really conscious of my steps, how many did I do today versus yesterday. And so, but because of the anticlimactic and the vulnerability, the sense of the whole lot coupled together, when I got back to the apartment, that 1.5 kilometer didn't mean it was a waste, because I didn't use it. I didn't use it until March. So I left in the August.
That's the thing, because you were there for a long time.
I was 3 months in hospital.
3 months in hospital.
Yeah.
And you went in, I got my notes. This is the first time that I actually brought notes with me. So your primary diagnosis was right posterior medulla oblongata.
Yep.
Infarct secondary to vertebral artery dissection.
Exactly.
What the fuck is that?
Exactly. It wasn't until I got the discharge notes.
Yeah.
From rehab about 3 weeks after I left, and it said primary diagnosis. I was like, oh my God, I now know. Because no one had said it. So what it basically means is my vertebral artery, which feeds a part of your brain.
Okay.
The medulla oblongata, as far as I'm aware, it's part of it. Dissected. Now, how that happened is still a little bit up in the air. One neurologist reckons that I have a polygenetic disorder that affects the collagen, the elasticity of my arteries, which is, we'd have to do more genetic testing for that. It could have been the fact that I was moving about, stretching with my neck, exactly the day before, because we had done a bit of cleaning, a little bit of decorating. Could be that. We don't entirely know. That part actually doesn't really matter to me, because
it happened either way.
It happened either way. So the dissection happened, and it's kind of like the inner lining of a pipe, and it's in the bloodstream, and blood gets attached to it, the cells get attached to it, and it forms a clot. And eventually the clot takes off in the stream, and it travels into your brain. Which caused the stroke. It caused the blockage. So. And
you couldn't walk.
Yeah, so my first day in hospital was a kind of I didn't realize how bad it was, because when you have a stroke, the overwhelming thing you want to do is sleep. For whatever reason, brain injury causes massive fatigue. They will all just tell you in hospital, it's the brain's way of sleep is really good for the brain to heal. And maybe that's the fact of it. I don't know. But after I left the emergency department and I was admitted to the acute stroke unit in the Mater Hospital, I slept till about 11:30 that night. And I know it was 11:30 because that's when the next entry in the nurse's notes were there. So, but what happened was, I had obviously woke up and called the bell, and I was still in my jeans and t-shirt from that morning. And I didn't actually know. I didn't really remember what had happened, and I just knew I needed to go to the toilet. And a nurse came along with a bottle. I was like, okay. Obviously, I'm not going to a toilet, obviously, so I have to do this here. And I tried to stand up, and I fell, and the cannula came flying out. So there was literally piss, blood, everything everywhere, and I was on the ground. And the nurse came running, and I don't know if it was another nurse or a HCA, but they managed to get me back into bed, strip me, bed bath me. Then they put what I can only describe as a puppy pad that we use for the dog underneath me, and dressed me in a gown, because the clothes I'd actually packed that morning in the state of having a stroke, what I'd actually packed was a hoodie and a phone charger. Not ideal for long-term stay in the hospital, but that'll tell you the way my mind was working. And so, yeah, they dressed me. But I remember lying there with the two of them were watching me thinking, this is actually really bad. Like, this is way, way worse than what you thought this morning. So something had happened. I'd gone downhill throughout the day. Because I woke up with the stroke, well, I think I need to get a few more answers, but I think because I woke up with the stroke, I wasn't a candidate for something called thrombolysis, which is a clot-busting drug. Now, there's a golden window, 0 to 3 hours or 0 to 4.5 hours, depending on probably, what policy is in place for that hospital or, a healthcare situation. They didn't know it me, and they also didn't know if it was a bleed, a hemorrhagic stroke. So the issue there would have been is if they had have actually treated me with that clot, but they could have made a bleed much worse.
I see.
So I guess I have questions as to why I got worse throughout the day when I ideally shouldn't have, but I did. I could stand when I got to A&E because they had to weigh me for blood thinners. They have to weigh you.
So it was after you fell asleep?
Oh, it was after.
That you lost your...
Yeah, exactly. But things started to come back to me. Like, the memory about that day is very hazy. But then I've had random thoughts about it. Like, I can remember one of the doctors telling me, you're going to be okay, you're going to be okay. And I'm really glad. I don't know what her name was or who she was, but I just remember thinking to myself, I actually really needed to hear that, because I had no one with me. There was no family. It was COVID. Mm-hmm. It was me, and that was it. No one was allowed into the Mater Hospital to see me. Nobody.
People were probably left in the dark as well, where
completely.
If you were asleep till 11:30, your family...
Whenever anybody rang, if they were allowed to be told what was going on, because actually not everyone was listening. Like, my parents and my boyfriend, they're totally different entities. So only one of them was actually listed as next of kin.
Exactly.
Like, my mother, they wouldn't really speak to my mother. And it wasn't until about the second or third day, and one of the nurses came around and said, can we change that so that we can speak to your mother? And I was like, I didn't really realise that was an issue. I was like, of course you can speak to my mother. But then again, that's the child in you when something goes really wrong.
Yeah.
Coming through. It's kind of like, but then you remember, actually, no, I'm 28. I'm a legal entity by myself. So they need to make sure that they can do that. But at the same time, the child in you is kind of saying, well, why aren't you speaking to my mother?
Yeah.
Of course, you need to speak to my mother.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that day, my memories of that morning started to come through a little bit more. In the hospital, I remember being weighed. I remember the neurologist coming around and saying, we think you've had a stroke. So I was told that information before I went to the ward. I just didn't remember it. Mm-hmm. Not a clue. And I went from being at least able to stand to... Nothing.
For how long?
I needed assistance to get from a bed to a chair for 3 weeks, assistance of 2. So... yeah, and then when the physios took over, a physio would work with me with a junior physio. So again, that was 2 people in a session for about a week more until they felt comfortable take me on by myself. So I guess I stopped using a wheelchair maybe 6 weeks after the stroke. They kind of took that away from me, because all I kept saying to them is, give me a Zimmer frame. I'll find a way. And they just were like, no, we don't want you to depend on a Zimmer frame. So, because I was looking at other people and
zooming around in the room.
I was like, they get a Zimmer frame and all I get is a wheelchair. It's like, I can't use this arm. How am I supposed to get around in a wheelchair?
That's so true.
That was the issue, because
you'd be fucking wheeling around doing 360s.
There was another girl, one of the girls in the rehabilitation. She come in her wheelchair, kind of a thing, and she'd be like, it's great to have a bit of freedom. I'm like, you absolutely
fuck you, you're free though.
Exactly, but I was delighted for her though, because I was like, oh, at least you can come in and visit me. Like, at least you can come in and, you know, we can sit and chat for half an hour.
Buddy.
But like that, you know, here's the tiredness, you know, affects the way you think and, you know, and communicate. That's, for me anyway, that's something I really realized. When I first had the stroke, when I think the first phone call I took might have been the third day after the stroke, and I could have managed 60 or 70 seconds on the phone. That was it. That's all I could do. It's the only communication I could do, because I was so tired, so exhausted. I couldn't think, couldn't talk because of the tiredness. My swallow was affected initially. I think it was about 2 weeks, 3 weeks before they felt comfortable putting me back on solid food. But to this day, I still will have issues with swallowing and my speech. Yeah, the speeching is called aphasia, and there's a touch of it there for me, not a lot. And I loved the way the speech therapist in rehabilitation sums it up. He said, you know, if I asked you to go find something, he said, you'd find the room, you'd find the cupboard, you'd find the file, you'd find the page. He says, you might even find the sentence, but you won't find the word. He says, you're so close. And that's not as bad as it could be for me. I'm okay with that, but I have some, not fun, but I laugh about that more so. I mean, for a week, I was delighted when I cut my fingernails. But I kept telling everyone I'd cut my hand nails because it was hand and neck. I was so close. Or the ice fridge instead of the freezer. So so it's the most weird thing, and that's something I'm concerned about. Like, you know, if I want to go back to work or do something, I'm kind of like, well, will that happen in a serious situation? Will somebody understand what I'm trying to get across? So those things cross my mind. I laugh about them now, but I'm like, in a year's time, will that be gone?
Yeah, especially because you're carrying yourself so well, like where to the point where it hasn't, touch wood, it hasn't impacted you to the point where like we're having a conversation now. Totally. You know what I mean?
They're like,
which is great, by the way.
I've seen, that's the really one thing about rehab is that you'll thank your lucky stars if you're doing okay. You really do. I mean, there was one poor chap, he could walk laps of the car park, but yet he'd sit on the side of his bed and look at his toothbrush for 5 minutes, not knowing why he had his toothbrush in his hand. Yeah. So there's, you know, a stroke can affect you in many different ways, many different personality, sex drive, everything. You know, one of the things that I remember being I suppose a little bit embarrassed, the occupational therapist, she said, you know, I need to tell you what might happen, you know, as your brain tries to heal itself. She said, you might start, she says, one of the things you need to look out for is inappropriate sexual advances. Wow. I was kind of shocked at that. I was kind of like, can't imagine that I'm not going to Harvey Weinstein it here. Like, I was like, I can't believe that could be me.
Blame it on the stroke.
Yeah, I know, but like, she was deadly serious. Yeah. She was like, as a matter of fact, this is one of those things that could happen. And when my personality, as I saw it, had changed, which it hadn't, I was dealing with issues, I started to worry, you know, as I became more aware, especially through working with psychologists, that actually, oh my God, you know, I am traumatized. I am agitated very easily. I do almost feel like I'm constantly argumenting or trying to scream, but nobody can hear you, this kind of thing. I mean, for a little while, I kind of felt like I was just been dragged along a little bit, kind of like, so yeah, I felt, I really did feel like I had a lot to say and didn't know how to say it. So I actually thought, one of the things she mentioned was, you know, your people's personality can change permanently. And I thought, I think, has mine changed? But it thankfully hadn't. And I didn't realize that until I'd done therapy. And it wasn't until after the fact, you're doing therapy and everything's fine, it's perfect. And you're saying everything's perfect because I'm doing therapy. But what happens when I don't? When I'm no longer doing therapy? And I remember 2 weeks after finishing with her, I ordered a card to send her and thank her. And I said, no, we'll wait, because maybe 2 weeks isn't long enough. Let's see if I'm still okay in like a month's time. A month came. Oh, no, wait, we'll wait. I still have the card, and I'm still doing okay. And I think I don't think she needs the card. I think she knows how grateful I was. But what it is for me is I still have that because I'm really still doing okay. I'd like to be able to say to her, here's a card from 2 years ago I ordered, and things are still great. Things are still. It was one of the best things I did. Was do therapy with Kathy Boyle. It was absolutely. It saved me from myself. I think I had become lost and self-destructive, especially after the stroke, because it was so anticlimactic, and I was scared. I was so scared about the future, like what's going to happen. At the time, I was still going through some after the fact health issues from the stroke. The stroke left me with loads of random bits and pieces. So I have something called central post-stroke pain syndrome in my left leg. Remember, it was my right side that I couldn't.
Okay.
So the medulla oblongata is responsible for how your brain perceives sensation, pain. Even so, one of the things they used to do with me quite a lot was actually, pricks of feathers and all sorts of things, just to say, can you feel that? Scale of 1 to 10, how much you can feel it. I can't feel temperature that well. So if the shower runs cold, I stand to the left because it doesn't really bother me. But my right side, and that's the side that
Careful.
I
Your head's okay?
yeah, no,
Jesus,
it's fine.
speaking about like
I'll just
medulla.
move forward. You're so close to the bar.
Carry
Do you
on.
know what? It's probably not the first time I've banged my head off a bar. Under different circumstances.
You're clickbaiting me right here
know.
now. Carry on.
But where was I?
You were talking about temperature and your
temperature, yeah.
different arm.
So it wasn't until kind of, and it's the weirdest thing in the world to stand holding a bar and shower when you eventually can get on your feet, but also have the occupational therapist in the bathroom with you. Be like, how's the temperature for you? Do you know? Can you feel? Because they see everything.
Yes, you're very vulnerable in that moment in time.
You lose your privacy, but I gave that up the moment I fell out of that bed on the first day. I sunk pretty low, not through my own fault, but yeah, that was the low point. Because I was literally covered in my own urine and blood. And
funnily enough, I think a lot of people, especially when they're young, they always say that like their worst fear when it comes to like medical situations I do not want anyone washing my ass. Kill me.
Believe me, when you were there, that's not it. That's not the worst thing. The worst thing, for 2 weeks, I had chronic hiccups. Again,
shit.
And that's a common thing with stroke, apparently. I did not random, but there's a fact for you.
I'm always such a bitch when I have hiccups, I'll be honest.
So I'm actually on medication that I take twice a day. For hiccups. And I have everything done on an Excel worksheet, and I print a PDF of all my medications, doctors, neurologists, the whole lot, and why I'm on all these different medications. And I send that to Connor periodically. Just like, updated medical list. God forbid, touch wood, I ever end up in hospital again.
You need that.
And he's like, I don't know what, no. He doesn't know what I take because I manage my medication. But at least he'd be able to say, okay, he's on this for this, or he could send it to somebody or something. But yeah, it was the most ridiculous thing, typing in next to that piece of notes to prevent chronic hiccups.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so random. Twice a day. Yeah.
Crazy.
Twice a day. Yeah. And when I think, there might be a hiccup coming, I panic. I'm like, oh my God, I can't go through, because they'd go on for half an hour at a time. And pain would get so bad. I'd be ringing Connor, be like, oh my God, it's so bad.
You're irritable as well. Like, I get very irritable when I have hiccups.
Like, I remember, it was so weird. Like, for a long time, the neurologist was probably like, what is wrong with this guy? But, he'd come around and be like, oh, what about the hiccups? I'm like, when can you get rid of the hiccups? Like, that's all I cared about.
That bubble in my
it wasn't about walking. It wasn't about, all I cared about was the hiccups. I was like, these are the things that are just stressing me the most about. Like, I was throwing up blood, I was out of it, but the hiccups were all what I cared about. It wasn't the walking. I'm not ashamed to say this, God love him, the poor physio in the Mater Hospital. I mean, he came around on day 2 and was like, right, we're going to get you sitting up. And I was like, no, you've got the wrong fella, fuck off. Like, I was like, you're not going anywhere near me. Like, I am not in the mood for that. Like, tired, hiccupy, throwing up blood. Do you think you're going to get me to do something? I really had no interest. And then when the occupational therapist came around, who I knew nothing about, I did not know what that profession really meant. And she came around with kind of silly little things like, can you put this pin in this peg, or whatever. And I know now, looking back, she was trying to assess my abilities from an occupational therapist, from that standpoint. But in my mind, I was kind of like, this is a waste of my time. I'm in a bed now, and I probably will be for the rest of my life. I wrote myself off, totally.
Because funnily enough, you actually wrote down over here, when I had finally stopped feeling sorry for myself.
Yeah.
And I understand that, like, you had a great team of, like, rehab specialists and all that.
Extremely. I had a really... So what was it?
What was the turning point where you're like, you know what, Andy? Like, stop.
I went in on a Monday morning, and I kind of battled with them all week. And I remember the physio was on annual leave on the Thursday and the Friday, or the Friday. So I really only had him for 2 or 3 days, and I told him to fuck off those 2 or 3 days. Yeah. I didn't want anything to do with anybody. I just wanted to feel better, I suppose. I felt so sick. My head was spinning, my vision. I really felt like nothing was happening quick enough. And the neurologist was kind of like, look, we just have to throw medication at you and see what sticks. He says, that's neurology, unfortunately. And I'm the type of person who's kind of like, I'm a perfectionist in what I do when I worked. I was like, that in my mind, I was like, that's not good enough. Like, that's not, but it's a different industry. It's different. It's not, I don't understand medicine. So fair enough, I was angry at the time. Yeah. So yeah, I felt sorry for myself, and I was angry, but he was off for the Thursday, Friday, and obviously there's no physio on a Saturday and a Sunday. So I had 3 or 4 days by myself, and I was kind of like, oh shit, like this is what could be it. Like I could be just in bed like this all the time. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is what I want. And I think, if I can remember correctly, one of the nurses or HCAs must have felt sorry for me or something, came round and was kind of like, can we get you into your chair? And I'd spent 3 days in the bed, so I was like, yeah, let's go. Let's get into the chair. Let's do that. And they made an effort to get me into the chair. And I was sitting there thinking, well, if I can get from the bed to the chair, I wonder, could I get from the chair to the bathroom eventually? And the Monday rolled around, and the physio came in, and I think he was probably expecting the same situation as last week. And he said, you know, are we doing anything today? I was like, yeah. He was like, really? I was like, yeah. I had just totally changed. Wow. I totally changed. I think I needed to be left by myself to see how shit the situation was, to take it in, just not to be bugged. But also the fact that I'd got from the bed to the chair, albeit with the help of 2 members of healthcare, but I'd got there. So 2 weeks and 1 day after the stroke, I walked unaided 3 steps between 2 physios. Now,
was that emotional for you?
I said, oh yeah, of course. I was kind of like, oh my God. I was like, I can only remember the name of one of the physios. I'm sure at the time I knew the other. I was like, lads, can you see what's like? Can you see this? Did anyone else see that? They brought me up to this tiny gym on the stroke unit, and they had me doing all sorts of bits and pieces. I went up there in a wheelchair, obviously, and they got me from one bench to sit down, and it was kind of just simple stuff like, you know, what we want you to do is, we know your right foot is really ataxic, like, you know, which was basically, it'll just do whatever it wants to do. It won't do what I wanted to do, it just does what it wants to do. So the coordination was brutal. And they were getting me to do this really simple stuff like, just, you know, we just don't want you to knock off the cones. Move your foot between the cones, don't knock the cones. That's the goal. And then out of nowhere, he says, will we try for a few steps? And I was kind of like, oh, that's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. Like, they stood me up, and it was like a child walking for their first few steps between mommy and daddy, and I walked from one to the other, but 2 or 3 steps. And 2 weeks, one that stands out to me always. It was emotional, and it is. If I was allowed to get a tattoo, which I'm not because of the blood thinners, that's what I'd have. Shit. That's what I'd have tattooed. Yeah, 2 weeks, 1 day. Everything changed after that. It's completely changed.
Yeah,
completely changed. I thought to myself, okay, you've again look back at where you've gone from. You've gone from falling out of a bed trying to use a bottle to go to the toilet, and blood going everywhere because of all the blood thinners, to walking, albeit 2 or 3 steps between 2 physios, and they're not always going to be there for life. But I'd done it, and that gave me hope. The second thing that gave me hope was the strangest, quietest man in the world. I was moved. So I was in the bay in the ward. I don't know if this is standard practice throughout all hospitals, but the bay in the ward I was in was, when you come from resus, you go straight into that bay. And then as you become more medically stable, or I suppose less, you require less resources medically, you move further down, next bay or bay 3 or bay 4. I think there was 11 bays. It was a huge ward. And at about 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, one of the HCAs came to me. He's Andy, how do you feel about he really liked, and I was real dove. He's like, Andy, how do you feel about your own room? I was like, what? How do you feel about? I was like, it's a bit late to be moving, isn't it? Like, I was like, no, I'm all right. I really didn't like just again telling you, stroke makes you tired. You will not do things for anything. He comes back to me and says, I really need you to. You will really do me a favor if you move to your own room. I was like, okay, fine. We moved 12 o'clock at night. Fine. It didn't, grand. And in that room, I was just sitting there. I'd ring Connor because I couldn't read anything. I couldn't read on the TV. I had me on TV. It was great. All of a sudden, I couldn't. Again, the vision was I was watching TV like this with one eye closed. But I'd ring Connor and he'd tell me, he'd be like, okay, on channel whatever, this is on. Because I couldn't read on my phone the TV guide. My vision was still really bad. And I'd say, oh yeah, I found it. Antiques Roadshow. I watched so much Antiques Roadshow. I live for Antiques Roadshow. I'd be like, I can't see it, but it was valued at a lot. She's delighted. But I was just watching, again, like that, watching Antiques Roadshow. And this man walked in, and I was bare behind him, the only one in this room, didn't say anything, walked around the end of the bed and came to the far side of the bed between me and the window. I'm kind of like, who are you? Because I knew he wasn't a nurse. Like, I knew he wasn't a HCA. I was like, he's definitely not the physios, and he's tall, and he kind of has a little bit his
think that angel Gabriel is at the
moment. but his posture's not 100%, but he's tall, and he introduced himself as Raymond Carson, consultant in rehabilitation, and he said, listen. He said, I have a unit in the National Orthopaedic Hospital at the moment. He said, it's geared up for people who are under the 65 years of age thing, because that's what everyone thinks. How do you feel about joining? And I was kind of like, right.
Like you got scouted.
Because they had told me that I was going to the Royal in Donnybrook. I didn't know much about it, except that's where my granny recuperated when she had her hip replacement. I was like, okay, I don't really know much about the Royal in Donnybrook. And I honestly thought the National Rehabilitation Centre was for, way more serious situations than mine. So, yeah, I was like, yeah, I'll take this opportunity. That's where I want to go, because he was basically like, we're taking you, like, if you want to, like, there's no ifs, buts, whatever. Like, whereas the Royal were kind of like, oh, well, does he, they were really stretched. And you have to remember, COVID was rampant. So the healthcare industry and staffing issues were massive. There was huge issues there. So no one really wanted an extra person who couldn't walk. At the end of the day, they didn't. To assist to a bathroom, to a chair, that's 2 members of staff who have to be there if I want to move. But he was okay with that, because what he had done was he had actually, I suppose, I don't know how he'd managed it, but what should have been 6 to a bay in Kappa in the National Orthopaedic Hospital, he had only had 4, so which meant that the staff, even, as I said to me, he said, it's great. It's like, we can actually do what we need to do for staff.
And more.
More, exactly. So he said, I've no issues taking it. He said there'll be a bed there available. He said, if you want it, take it. So weirdly enough, I ring Connor and I tell him what's after happening. And he says, well, I know of somebody who was told that they wouldn't be able to walk or talk or have any sort of independence, who's doing really well over there through someone. He knew this through someone in work. And I was like, well, if that person was told they couldn't walk or stand, and they are now, that's where I need to be. So when I saw Raymond Carson again, I was like, yeah, I'm going. Mm-hmm. Yeah, as it take me 100%. That's where I need to be. There was no ifs, buts about it. I think my parents were really unsure about the situation. They didn't really know Dublin hospitals or where the right place was for me to be. Mum kept going on about the National Rehabilitation Centre. The waiting list for it is quite long, and the problem with stroke rehabilitation is that the most important progress happens within the first 6 months. Yeah. So you need to act, unless even less, 6 months is good, but if you can get it within the first, if you can get as much done as quickly as possible, you really need to act quick with stroke rehabilitation. So I didn't know that at the time, but I know that now, and I was very lucky because I really didn't have time to wait to get to the National Rehabilitation Centre. I'm really glad I took the offer to do that. When I got there, I was medically stable at that time, enough for me to go. When I got there, the weirdest thing I found was that I just didn't hear any machines beeping or I didn't hear anything, or pumps for people who were being fed through tubes around. Like, it was so bizarre. The peace was so bizarre. And a nurse came and sat in front of me with a table, introduced herself, went through the rules and bits and pieces, because the rehabilitation centre kind of follows the guidelines a nursing home would roughly follow. So, the one thing I thought, well, I was kind of like, oh my God, you'll never get that out of me. But she said, no, there's no sitting around in your pajamas here all day. She's like, you're up and out of bed at 7:30 in the morning, and they will wash you, and you will be dressed, and you will have runners on, no slippers. Damn. And I was kind of like, oh, I don't know. This sounds more like
we'll see about that.
Sports cap to me,
exactly.
lady.
Like army.
But I think what it was that, laziness has no place to hide somewhere like that. You have to really want it. And, he spoke to me. He knew I wanted it. I really, really wanted it. I knew I wanted it. Mm-hmm. There was one day of physiotherapy I missed. Only one day. And it was because they'd given me my iron tablet. I don't know how it had. They'd given me my iron supplement first thing that morning. And I wasn't really a breakfast person at the time. Maybe an apple or something. And it made me so nauseous. Yeah. And when I got into the gym, it was the physio actually said to me, she said, Andy, she says, I'd prefer you went back to your bed. You were just like the colour of a piece of paper. Like, mm-hmm. So out of all the time I was there, I missed one session. Damn. One session. And as I think Grace said to me at the end, we were talking about it, I was like, I only missed one session with you. And she's like, and it wasn't through any fault of your own. So she'd been keeping note as well. Like, as I said, there's no place for laziness to hide.
That bit is so interesting as well, because you sort of touched on it, that with a stroke, you are at a very fragile state. Like, you're going through all this feeling, but there is no room for not even pitying yourself, but like, because of the progress, you kind of have to snap out of it.
You don't, you're right. It's true. You don't, unbeknownst to yourself, because at the end of the day, you've had a stroke. You don't know, you haven't done stroke 101. So you don't know everything there is to know about a stroke, but you're not told, because people don't want to give you, I think there's a little bit of sugarcoating from medical staff with regards to this. People don't want to say to you, look, you need to snap out of this because you have 3 months. You have 3 months in the system, and that's probably all we're going to give you.
Do you think that approach would have helped you in hindsight?
I don't know if it would have made me mad, or maybe the attitude I probably would have taken is, who in God's name do you think you are telling me that? I think that's probably how I would have felt about it.
Yeah, like you understand the sugarcoating probably.
Yeah, I think I needed to reach it myself. And when I did, there was no stopping me until I got home, because as I, after rehabilitation, you're thinking about, when am I getting home? When am I getting home? When am I getting home? Have I done enough today? You're ringing home the whole time with the progress, and you're getting positive feedback, really positive feedback. And at the same time, if you haven't had such a good day, you're also told, but you've had a stroke, don't worry about it, whatever. Your family and your friends aren't going to be the ones who say to you, you're not doing enough, or you need to be in a better place to do this. So I really do think there needs to be less sugarcoating for young people who are 100% capable of getting up and doing this. It's tough. I don't want anyone to be in that position, but if you are, definitely, you got to get up and do it.
And I think this is probably an ideal situation, and it's no pressure whatsoever on the healthcare system, because they're doing so much. But I do think that maybe some training, or sitting the family down and explaining to them, listen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what, I can't that's difficult for me to comment on because of COVID. Family, no one was really allowed in. I mean, Connor was allowed in once every 2 weeks for 15 minutes.
Oh, like
so no one
nothing,
was got, which is like no one. They were in my maybe they do sit family down and say this is what when he goes home. This is
I don't know, like even just creating a fucking brochure on the care package, just being like, look, this is what happened to them. This is what you should expect.
I think what should happen. I think what should happen is. If I'd had a baby, a public health nurse would come around, or I go to public health nurse and they'd check in on me and make sure baby and everything's gonna work, everything's fine. And I think somebody needs to check in with you. Somebody needs to come around to the house, and I think that should be the public health nurse and say, "How are you getting on? How's the family doing?" I think that's what needs to happen. Are there any issues? Yes, you did leave hospital to shower and wash and dress yourself, but how have you since found that? And I think if that had happened, maybe the fact that I went from doing my physio in rehabilitation to literally going from the bed to the couch in the apartment because I just felt so vulnerable would have been picked up on a little bit sooner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, it's not in any way their fault because they are so under pressure, you know what I mean? It's more just probably from an institutional level that they should probably report that issue and act on it.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the reason why, I mean, the audits, if I'm not mistaken, only began in 2018 or 2019, the National Stroke Audits. And I think the purpose of that is to, I think, be transparent about the situation. And one of the unfortunate things is that, a lot of older people who have a stroke, they're not given the chance I was given.
No.
And it's nursing home is where that's the designation. Automatically, they're kind of wrote off in that sense. So I think the resources are spent on younger and people they deem capable of doing the rehabilitation. Whereas, when the HCA said to me in rehabilitation, he said, the bay over next to me, was the geriatric stroke patient. That's where they were. And he said, there's loads of people in there who'd be capable of doing, he says, but they're just here waiting for a nursing home. And that's what they've been signed. They're not going home. There's no one to look after them. They're not given the chance to live independently again.
Which is so horrible to think.
Yeah, it is. And it's difficult on families. I'm
not saying it's ageist, but like, I think it's just so shit that the moment that you turn 65, it's like, okay, you don't have a job anymore. Hopefully you saved up enough. Yeah. If something happens to you, you're on your way out anyways.
And it kind of does bug me that the only statistics that I have is that I can only tell you that a quarter of the stroke cases audited in the 2020 national audit for stroke were under 65, but I can't give you a further age breakdown, and that bugs me.
17 to 64 is a massive age group.
That's a massive age group. And I think that does need to be broken down a little bit more, so that I can say, well, actually, 40 people in our age group last year had a stroke, and unfortunately, the fatality rate is around 8%, so it's quite high.
Yes,
it's quite high. I mean, when I know COVID spread through the community like there's no tomorrow, but the fatality rate was 0.01%, not 8, not 10. Some years it's been 10.
Yes.
And I do know that that I did read in the report that one of the concerns raised in the introduction is that there might be a little bit of a deficit when it comes to public awareness around what they should do when a stroke occurs or how to spot a stroke.
Yeah.
Fair enough, we're getting people to hospital quicker, those who have it, if you recognise it.
And if a fucking paramedic decides to scooch up a little bit.
If they think, you're having a stroke, if you're lucky enough for them to know
that. And kudos to you for getting over that hunch.
Well, I had no choice. You
had no choice. Yeah, that's true.
The weird thing is that when I did the GDPR thing for my medical notes from the Mater Hospital, I did it for a few reasons. I did it because I wanted all the facts of what happened to me. Because I kind of thought to myself, if I'm going to talk about this and use myself as an example, I need to know as much as what happened to me. I need to know why.
Yeah, that's true.
But I took the opportunity to do the same thing with Dublin Fire Brigade because they were the paramedics that arrived that morning.
Okay.
And the email I got back was, here's your reference number, but there's no notes. And I haven't yet, and I might do, but my thinking is, this is a stroke, a fast call. This is the third leading cause of death in Ireland, and there's no notes. There's not anything from that call that morning. Nothing.
Am I just the reference number?
Am I just and to me, that's not good. And that's either a failure with them, or perhaps a failure on the National Office of Audit to say to the paramedics, fire brigade, whoever it is who's bringing that, you are responsible for being part of this audit. You need to have your shit together. You need to have your notes. Any stroke call, any call for that matter, whatever it is, you can't just be like, we've dropped them off the hospital, off we go, we're done, on to the next gig. It can't be that. So unfortunately, I don't know if we ever will get answers for those 15 minutes that morning. And that's something I'm not angry about anymore. But eventually I hope I either get those answers or I get over it, because I don't want it to follow me around for life either. I'm
super happy that everything turned out fairly okay for you. It could have been a lot worse.
Oh yeah, totally. It could have been on the wrong side of statistics.
They could have kept arguing. They could have left. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. They could have been. They were pretty slow as it was, but they could have been much slower.
They could have been much slower. Yeah. So of course, there's always going to be the worst case scenario for everything that you've been through.
I think.
But they do deserve that pressure.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
I think the one thing that's super powerful about social media in general is that when you spread awareness from an educated point of view, you can put pressure on the right people to get their shit together. Why did you ask for your notes?
So one of the reasons, I suppose, was the 15 minutes with the ambulance service, which is the Dublin Fire Brigade. I wanted to know kind of what happened there. Unfortunately, I didn't get the answers to that. But the other reason, with regards to the Mater Hospital and my stay from admission to the emergency department and discharge to a rehabilitation centre, was I really felt like if I'm going to try and promote our generation knowing a little bit more about something that does affect them, I thought with the best way not to be hypocritical is to actually know exactly what happened to myself. If I'm going to use myself as some sort of an example, I need to know exactly 100% what happened. And that's part of who I am anyway. I think I need to know all the facts before I do anything. It's not that I'm cautious. It's just that I think if you can get the information, you should. So
data helps.
Yeah, data helps. Exactly.
For sure.
Data helps.
It helps with the argument as well.
Exactly. And unless you're someone who can successfully, but also look like an idiot, argue with facts, then fine, albeit off with you. That's what I'm saying or doing isn't going to affect you. But if you're somebody who's willing to say, yeah, that's the facts, that's the data, and anything I do say or promote online, I make a point of showing where I've got that information from.
Yes.
At the moment, a huge amount of the information that I promote online has come from the 2020 stroke audit, and that's published for anybody to see so they can fact check anything I've said. But at the same time, on days where I'm kind of thinking, what's important to say, I might have a think about what I went through and think, well, I think at this moment in time, I think, this is what's like. There was somebody who reached out to me online on Instagram. They just happened to say, I followed your stroke awareness project because I was 28 when I had a stroke. And I think they're in the UK. And I was just kind of saying, how have you felt since? Like, what's the big change in your life that you find? And he was saying that he is hyper focused on the risk factors of having another stroke. And while that's not healthy for anybody, including stroke survivors, and it really isn't, you can't be hyper focused on something. I think it's important to be aware. I think you need to know the facts. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to be that person. That's everyone. You're grown up.
Word of advice for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about saying don't smoke, don't do this, don't do. It's or we all know we could do better when it comes to our health. Every one of us has a vice. Every one of us, and I'm sure some people have more than one or two. None of us are angels. None of us are perfect. But at the same time, I think it's really important that we know the facts around something that a quarter of cases affect people under 65 years of age. And as I have said before, I think what shocked me the most was that the amount of people who've reached out to me and said, "Oh my God, I was 28 too." It's the amount of people who have said that to me is too many.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's too many. I thought I was special for a little, but I'm not that special, and I don't think people realize that. I think a lot of people have strokes, and you kind of think, oh, they've had a stroke or whatever, and it can be. Some people are really lucky, and they can be in hospital for 3 or 4 days, out of work for a month, and then they're back to normal. They've got away really lightly, and I think young people can get away with it really lightly. But time and knowing what a stroke is, knowing the symptoms, time as brain is something that they're trying to push in Ireland at the moment with within the healthcare staff and hospitals, and with the audit for the National Stroke Audit. And what that basically means is that every second matters. So if you're going to have a stroke, you're going to have a stroke. How you approach that and deal with it is what's going to save ultimately your life, or a lifetime of physical, mental, or emotional deficits. It's not worth not knowing at the end of the day. I got away lucky.
For those people that are currently suffering with a brain injury, whether it is a stroke or anything else, a lot of the time you think the common misconception is that they feel very helpless, which is quite true. If that person is feeling helpless, what do you have to say to them?
To the people around?
To the people that are going through this right now.
Oh, I think it takes time, and I think you need to give yourself time. One of the last things that was said to me before I left rehabilitation was, my rehabilitation consultant, he wanted to know what my plans were for the future. So I'm going back to college. Straight away, he was kind of like, "What do you mean?" Because in my mind, it's like, it's COVID still, everything's still online. Grand.
I can keep up with the Zoom lecture,
I can keep up with this. And he said to me, no, he says, you need to give it at least a year. And I didn't listen. And that caused more heartache because I tried and it didn't work when I really should have just not tried, because the professional told me to give it a break. The other side of the coin is it's something I learned again through therapy with Kathy. Was I kept giving myself a date. I kept saying, I'll be ready for September, I'll be ready for October, or at the end of this year, that's when I'll be whatever. And she posed it to me. She said, do you mind me asking why you're putting a timeline on your recovery when even a neurologist wouldn't be able to tell you when you'll be ready to do X, Y, or Z? And I couldn't answer that. And I think looking back, at the time I couldn't answer it, but I know now looking back, I was doing it for other people. I want to be able to say to my parents, oh, I'll be back doing this at Christmas or in January, or to Connor, I'll be back working and contributing financially to us in 6 months or a year. Like, that's what it is. It's because you're kind of like, their lives have to continue too. Unfortunately, it's not like nobody just stops because I've had a stroke. I stop. Yeah. And you see other people continue, so you kind of say to yourself, you feel obliged. It's this whole thing, but it's ingrained in us as a society, particularly in Ireland. I mean, we have one of the highest third level qualification finishing.
Yeah.
Education is our highest export. There is so much emphasis when you're in secondary school to, you have to go to college, you have to be doing something, you have to whatever. And in Ireland, it is that way. You have to be doing something. You have to work all the hours under the sun or go to college, whatever. So I found it quite tough to not know when I'd be working all the hours under the sun again or going to college again. And the advice I would give to somebody based on that was the toughest thing for me, I think, is take time out. You're going to have to find something to do. Find a reason to go for a walk and do your physio. Find a reason to get out of bed. And even though you're not going to work or going to college, do get out of bed.
What is your reason?
To get out of bed? Me. I'd love to say it's somebody else, but it's me. Like, I love Connor, but my reason's me. I have to get out of bed for me. It's the same reason they get you out of bed at 7:30 in the morning in rehabilitation. It's because it's the right thing to do.
Wow.
Even if it's just sitting in the chair. And sometimes I could just be sat in the chair, but I'll be doing something. I'll be doing something on the computer. I'll be editing photos. I'll be doing whatever. But I get up, I have a shower, brush my teeth, and I get dressed. I learned to do that. Again, shouldn't have had to, but I did. So I'm not going to waste that.
For sure.
That's the reason why. The reason why I do it is because I learned to do it again.
Okay.
And it's a good reason.
And I can tell, correct me if I'm wrong, but like your relationship with yourself is probably stronger.
Oh, 100%. Way
after
better.
the stroke.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like something that I kind of want to highlight. I know that it's unfortunate for you that you had to go through the stroke in order to get that.
Sometimes I think to myself, would I like to be the Andy before the stroke or the Andy I am today? And I think the Andy I am today has far more clarity about who he is than the Andy before the stroke. And I don't know if that's because I had to grow up really quickly, or if it was the therapy that I went through. And I think it was the therapy. I think while we went through that, for one reason, we tidied up a few other issues too along the way. I think we fine-tuned me. I prefer the person I am today, 100%, without a doubt. Definitely, I can look myself in the mirror and say, you're doing the right things. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're contributing the best you can to your relationships in a meaningful way, and you're not taking anybody for granted, or yourself for that matter. Physically, of course, I'd love to be able to get on a bicycle or run a marathon or whatever. And I didn't do any of those things before the stroke, so I took that for granted. So if you want to run a marathon, I'd suggest doing it.
Don't wait.
Don't wait. Just do it. Physically, yeah, of course, I'd love to go back and have the physical side of who I used to be. But I mean, of course, I'd love to be able to get a tattoo tomorrow, not worry about medication, not be in pain, if I have a blood pressure monitor at home and if I have a headache, I check it to make sure it's right, you know?
You have to adapt. These
are the things that I would love to, as a 29-year-old, to say I don't want to deal with, but I have to deal with them. They are my life, and that's just that. There's other side, and I know I'm coping because I've taken on more as well alongside it. So I must be doing all right. I think I'm doing okay. You know,
you seem like you are, honestly.
Well, I think so. I mean, I always seem to want to try and do more than what is for me. So yes, I'm able to take my medication, get up in the morning, get washed, dressed fine, and look after that side of me. But you know, I've launched the stroke awareness project. That's on top of looking after myself. I'm doing a charity thing in June. That's on top of looking after myself. And as a team, as a couple, me and Connor are moving on with our lives. And that's on top of just me looking after myself. And cooking. I've become a bit of a cook. I know.
What you cooking?
So I'm actually cooking tomorrow. And tomorrow I'm doing a sausage pasta. I make a mean chicken, leek and mushroom pie. Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I make a good homemade burger as well. Beef burger, yeah. A lot of bacon, but the problem with the baking is that everyone in the house is watching what they eat, so I can't do baking at the moment.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so...
I don't know, maybe some, like, sugarless brownies?
No, that's the point. What's the point? What is the point?
Granola bar instead.
I'm going to make, because it's Easter, some carrot cake cupcakes.
Okay, yeah, that's nice. Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah. So, yeah, like... for anybody who's in a hopeless situation, and my heart does go out to them because I know what it's like to be there. It's low, it's bleak.
They have to go through it as well.
Yeah, it is part of the journey. But I often say, and I see it the whole time on the subreddit for stroke, family members, I don't know what to do or how you can get this person to snap out of it. And I kind of feel like saying, that's not your responsibility. You know?
Yeah, that's something that I've noticed the more episodes I record with people that have gone through more like extreme situations like yourself. And I always ask this question is, if there's someone that's going through that you know, how can you help them? And the one answer is always, they have to go through it. They will save themselves.
Oh yeah, no, you can't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure there is like certain stuff, for example, you brought up the sugar coating, that sort of thing, maybe sometimes being a bit more compassionate, listening and honest.
I think it's kind of the good cop, bad cop thing works.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
I think you need somebody to tell you it straight as. I really did not like the neurologist I had in the Mater Hospital. And I still have. I'm still under his care, actually. I have no issues with it now, but at the time I did not like him. And the reason why I didn't like him, because one of the days he came round to do his rounds, he saw me stood and he said, "Oh, there's a chance you might walk again." And that left me with, well, nobody said there wasn't a chance. Like, what? Is there something? I felt like there was something going on behind the scenes that I didn't know about. How come someone hasn't come and said to me, you might not walk again? Nobody has said that.
Yeah, like, and that's the thing, you kind of brought it up before, where they treated you as they should have, like an adult, and like not calling your next of kin and all that sort of thing. But then they didn't treat you like an adult in
the emotional, that
don't
side
tell,
of it. Yeah.
Like, I'm very passionate about, like, do not say no on behalf of other people.
No, I really felt like, you know, there are the people, he should have been, or somebody should have said to me, listen, if you don't do this, you're not going to walk again.
Yeah. You would have gotten maybe out of your pity party a little bit earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
Who knows?
I would have said, you know what, I'd like to walk again, let's do this. Instead of, I'd resign myself to the bed regardless. I'd said, okay, here I am now. But if someone had came along and said, actually, there's a really good, it wasn't until Raymond Carson came along and said, I believe you'll walk again, but you need to do the work. Are you going to do it?
Exactly.
And, you know, as I said to you, under his care and in that environment, there was no place for laziness.
No.
It couldn't hide anywhere at all.
In general, probably, not just like in the hospital.
Well,
but like
in the Mater, you could get away with it. I got away with it. As I said, they let me have my pity party for 3 or 4 days. Fine. Maybe they chose to. Maybe they thought that was the best course of action for me. But at the same time, when I snapped out of it, I progressed each day.
You were an animal, yeah.
I progressed, and it's my biggest achievement, and it's my proudest thing is that I did that. Yeah,
for sure.
I often find myself saying, in the most ridiculous situations, things that I don't agree with. I'd say to myself, you know, well, I didn't fucking learn to walk again for this to fucking happen. Like, do you know what I mean? And that's why I see things now as like, you've done too much to let this stop you, whatever it might be. You just got to keep going. And the negative side of that, well, which is interesting because it's a positive to some people, is that I have become quite stress-free. I don't have as many freakouts as I see other people have around me. And I think my sister summed it up really well. She said to Connor recently, Connor was like, Andy's just so relaxed about, I don't know what, I can't remember. And she turned to him, she said to him, well, he did nearly die and had to learn to walk again. So I don't think most things will affect him anymore. Like,
you did have to face death.
Oh, like the mortality rate. I remember when I first read it, when I first looked up the statistics, when I started looking into this a little bit more and wanting to know, you know, obviously understand what's going on with me and how did it happen and why did it happen. And when I saw the mortality rate for one particular year was 10%, I was kind of like, what the fuck? How is this not a big thing? And then to learn that it's one of Ireland's leading reasons people are dead. It's the third cause of death in Ireland, like stroke.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is shocking, and I'm on the right side of the statistics, but not everyone is as lucky.
Exactly.
So it is so important that we push the message. And I think where it's failing, and I think where me and Connor were lucky, in particular me lucky, with our information, is Connor knew the small campaign, I knew the small campaign. I knew the fast campaign. I knew the face arm speech time to act. I knew that from years. That's been pushed in Ireland for years. But we know that from growing up watching TV.
Yeah.
Having to sit through adverts.
Okay.
Having to sit, if you want to continue watching this film on RTE2, we have to sit through this 3 or 4 minute advert, which includes a public message, a health campaign from the Public Health Authority, whoever. We had no choice. I think part of the issue now is in this day and age, as you know, we talked about through the break, is that people have 15 seconds of attention span. They don't want ads. You can skip them. There's ad blockers. There's whatever. These campaigns aren't put in front of a generation that are going to see them anymore. This is part of the issue. Like, where do you see public health campaigns anymore?
You're right.
You know, there's no.
I haven't seen one.
There's genuinely no point in putting them on TV. Yeah. We don't watch TV. We stream things. We skip the YouTube ad at the 15 seconds if we can. And
the companies that are investing in social media ad budgets are crazy. Advertising a deodorant.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Like, how's the HSE or any public health authority supposed to compete with major, as you said, corporations paying for advertising space? So we need to push those campaigns in the right places. I don't think they are in the right places. This is the issue.
You are correct.
There's no point in launching something like...
No, you are right. I've never thought of it that way, because they need to be where people's attention span is at. You know?
And Facebook isn't even it anymore. We've all moved... Our generation have moved on from Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, the FAST campaign was launched again last year on Facebook. Mm. I don't use... I think...
No. Our grannies use it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So what is the point in it being there? You know, I've paid for some of my own money personally to be used to promote some of the posts on the Stroke Awareness Project.
Did they get banned or something? Probably.
No, they didn't. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, you know, they get a little bit of traction. And now it could be £4 a post or whatever, like, you know, once a week. But it gets a bit of traction. And I feel like that's what needs to be happening. I don't see that happening. Mm-hmm. But that's what needs to be happening. If we're going to talk seriously about it with regards to national campaigns, it needs to be where our generation see it. Because also, even though it's only 25% of cases are below 65, we're all going to be above, hopefully, touch wood, above 65 at some stage.
Yeah. From a business standpoint, I'm going to say they technically could... I don't think with the funding, but you can always have a YouTube ad, like 10 minutes non-skippable.
Yeah. It doesn't even need to be 10 minutes.
But, 10 seconds skippable, non-unskippable ad. The issue is money.
Yeah, I agree.
What are they using it on?
Yeah, well, I don't know, but I do. If they really want to cut down the time it takes for someone to arrive, it's not... This is another issue I have with the audits on stroke, is that it's not the time you are admitted to hospital, it's the time you arrived at hospital. There's a difference between the two. You can arrive and hang around on a trolley before you're technically admitted and seen by... And that's the issue. There's a big difference between the two. So that's one issue. But if they really want to cut down the time that it takes for somebody to get the realization, first of all, that someone's having a stroke, get them to hospital, get them taken care of, which means ultimately, hopefully, they're not going to require a bed in an acute stroke unit, perhaps, or maybe even rehabilitation. You get them back home fine with some sort of physio, and it can be done in the community. It cuts down on a burden on the healthcare system. Not a burden, the stress, the resources are reduced on the healthcare system. If you really want to talk about that, and that's what they're pushing for, we need to place annoying campaigns where our generation see them. And they do need to be the, oh my God, I want to skip this ad thing. But because then it's, how many times have I seen this ad? I can tell you what I've seen, or what ads are annoying me at the moment on YouTube. I can tell you the ones that are always targeted at me.
Girl.
Yeah, no, but, yeah, exactly. You can tell. I know exactly which ones are annoying. I'm like, oh my God, this ad again.
Yes.
I know what it's about. And fair enough, I do skip it after the 15 or 20 seconds, but I know what it's about.
It's there.
It's
exactly.
there.
Yes.
So it doesn't have to be something that people are going to watch a minute of. It just has to be annoying. It has to. I know that sounds weird. But
it should be done.
Yeah, it should be that. Yeah.
Because this is someone's life at the end of the day. Like, it could be as annoying. Sorry, not sorry. You have to be a little bit unapologetic with
it. Exactly. That's why I say it has to be annoying. It has to be unapologetic. It has to be there in front of you, just on the nose, as they say. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I don't see that anymore. I remember on the TV the ad years ago where I think it was a man in the cinema and he couldn't smile anymore. His face that's how I knew about the smile thing.
Oh, yes. On the sofa or something.
But that was on the TV. But an advert, part of a string of adverts between two parts of a show.
Yeah.
Who does that anymore? Nobody sits through, not really, like, so.
Exactly.
And there's no point in pushing things on Facebook.
No.
So I have been a little bit disheartened as to where these things are being pushed, and they're not in the right places, and they're not the right message. They're not the complete message, and that's unfortunate. And that has been recognised in the most recent audit that was released on stroke cases in Ireland, that there might be an issue there with the public's perception of what a stroke is, how to recognise it, and how to deal with it. It's one thing recognising it; it's how to deal with it. You have to get someone to medical treatment as quickly as possible.
And that's where sharing your story comes through, eh?
I hope so. I think the paramedics were one thing. Yes, I agree. But I really do think what saved me was the fact that I was 2 minutes from the Mater Hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think once I got into the care of the emergency room doctors and resus,
They took care of you the moment.
Yeah,
that's like.
I have to admit, it does worry me. Regional hospitals in Ireland, some of them have such a brutal reputation. It worries me. And I've seen the reports. I've seen the data. I'm kind of like, the closest one to me at the moment is NACE. And I've checked. I'm like, okay, NACE, okay. They did okay in 2020. I'll be fine. But it's not the Mater Hospital. That's what, which is wrong. It's not the way you should be thinking when it comes to a stroke.
You should trust every single hospital.
Yeah.
Because this happens so often.
Okay, yeah,
8 to 10,000 a year,
exactly.
by the way.
A huge amount. 8 to 10,000 a year, exactly. And the fatality rate can be between 8 and 10%. So it's a huge amount.
It's one too many.
It's one too many, yeah.
For that.
With regards to risk factors, obviously, obesity is a big one, and that's something that Europe is struggling with. We all know if we're a little bit overweight, we all know it's not good for us. Smoking's another one. Excessive alcohol, your diet. We all know this. These are things we do know.
Yes, I actually wanted to ask you about that. So, with the focus on living a healthy lifestyle, right? A lot of people kind of say, do everything that you could well now so that your future self will thank you. Exercise. Do all of that. Eating healthy food so that you diminish the risk of dementia.
Yeah, okay. So while none of those things probably would have helped my situation with regards to how I had a stroke, I think mine... the dissection's a little bit unusual, so my situation is a little bit different. But I think anybody should prevent anything from blocking.
You can try as hard as you can.
Yeah.
Just so that you don't have a regret to a certain extent.
No, I 100% agree with you. I mean, no one wants to hit 40 and say, oh, Jesus, I need to start going out to the gym or jog. Or these are habits that we definitely should be getting into at a younger age. And in Ireland, we push silly things in the education system that could be easily replaced with things that are more vital and important.
Yes, that matter.
Yeah, and the classic example is of transition year. There's so much that could be done with that year. If a lot of schools won't let you skip it, so if you're not going to let students skip it, actually start promoting some practical things.
Some good habits.
Yeah, some good habits, mental health.
Yes.
I'm a big believer that mental health issues can be picked up at 16 years of age. And I think in schools, I put a huge amount of onus and responsibility on schools. I think a lot of it is actually, I'm not saying teachers. I don't think teachers, I don't think that's their job. That's not what they're trained to do. It's not what they went to college to do.
Agreed.
But I think there's a massive responsibility on schools to safeguard and prevent damage to their students in the future, whether it's physically or mentally. So if I'm going to say, I think there should be a process to pick up mental health issues in school. I think the same process should be there for young people to learn how to physically look after themselves. Yeah,
for sure. And what are you doing now? So are you a lot more cautious?
Am I a lot more cautious?
Or like just your
physically, mentally, or emotionally?
Technically, everything. I do think that when it comes to health, it's always social, physical, and mental.
Okay, so when it comes to... So my weight ballooned after the stroke because I wasn't moving. Yeah, exactly. I walked everywhere beforehand. And so it wasn't until April last year when I decided to do something about that. So physically, no, I'm not more cautious. I will go on as many walks, and if I can hike up something, I will. Yeah.
Don't go into that. I want to ask you a really good question.
I will do as much as I can. And I find when I compare myself to last year, I find myself being able to do more. So yeah.
Yeah, that's probably with time as well, right?
I think so too. But calculated risks, safer risks, I think are important. At the end of the day, as I often say to myself, I didn't learn to feckin' walk again to not do that. I'm going to do that. So that's one thing. With regards to my medical health, I'm a cautious kitten. Oh yeah, totally. I'd love to go out and get a tattoo. I remember when I asked, so when I went for the MRI, the original MRI scans, obviously they took out my jewelry, and I think they actually got lost. They were cheap, so it didn't matter. I didn't really care, and that was the least of my worries were some ear studs, and they closed up my ears. And I remember asking the GP, I said, I just happened to be in about something. I said, would it be a big issue if I got my ears pierced again? And he kind of looked at me, and I was like, I know it's really vain. He's a young guy. I really like him. And he said, look, if they don't stop bleeding, they don't stop bleeding. He says, that's that. You won't know till you get it done. So I went and got them done.
And?
They stopped bleeding. We were really surprised. We were like, oh my God, like I can literally pick the smallest thing by accident or nick myself off something and it can shaving cuts. Oh my God.
Yeah.
We went and viewed a house and I had a plaster across my face. Like I was like, this is not ideal, but it was better than a face with a bloody tissue. So
fair enough.
Yeah. So with regards to my health, I'm careful. Take my tablets when I'm supposed to. I know what I'm taking. I don't take anything I shouldn't. I also know exactly what I'm taking. I know everything around them. I know why I'm not in certain medication because I find it really important to know as much about what you're up to if you can. Without being Dr. Google, I think that's a problem. So yeah, I am cautious with that side of it. Emotionally and mentally, am I careful? I'm in such a better place. I don't think so. I think I have way more leeway to be who I want to be.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to be that person anymore.
Exactly.
I don't care what people think about me because I know who I am.
Yeah.
I know what I'm capable of. And so mentally and emotionally, no, I don't I take as many risks as I possibly can. I put myself out there 100%. And I think I should. I don't think I should hold back in that sense. Physically, calculated risks. Medically, I do what the doctor tells me. So there you go.
You follow it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On the first year anniversary of your stroke, you climbed up Derrybon Mountain in County Wicklow.
I did.
Looking back, how do you feel about that?
I think that was June last year, and I think I was still harboring a little bit of anger towards the stroke. Not towards anyone in particular, not towards myself, just the stroke. And it was a weekday. And I'd asked Connor to take the day off work because, first of all, I didn't want to be by myself on that day. I didn't want to be enveloped in thoughts about the whole thing. And what actually, how it transpired was on the 2nd of June, it's my birthday, we were supposed to do that hike. And we couldn't do it. It rained. And I said, well, why don't we do it on the 8th? Because I was thinking, what could we do? What could we do? What could we do? And I felt like this will be the biggest FU to stroke. And I think we ascended 160 or 200 meters up. I can't.
200 meters.
200 meters up Derry Bond Mountain. We could have went further, but I'd probably gone through one inhaler at that stage, so that was enough. Brought the dog, Connor. We had one break. It did nearly kill me, I won't lie, at the time. But I was so glad I did it. And I'd made sure that Connor printed out and laminated a little Be Fast thing. It looks so silly looking back on it now. It's not a swish as I'd like it to be. But I just like, look, Be Fast. I did it. And yeah, looking back, I was so glad I did it. And this year, I did it for me. Yes, it was to raise awareness. I did do it for me. 100%. I needed to, I think. I really needed...
your first one, for sure.
I think I needed to shake off the shackles of the whole situation.
I think it's also symbolic because you started this with your 2 weeks, 1 day.
Yeah.
Where you did 2 steps.
Yeah.
Versus ascending up 200 meters.
Yeah.
On your first anniversary.
Yeah, 2-1. Yeah, yeah.
Kudos to you, honestly.
Now, it took a lot. It's not something it goes back to this whole thing of it's a marathon, not a sprint. I'm sure there was people in their 60s going up there quicker than not me, but like that's
no,
that's fine. It was just something I had to do, and I know people are probably looking, Jesus Christ, that young fella's very out of, he's really unfit, but you can't go around at the same time wearing a sash saying stroke victim or stroke survivor or whatever. Actually, that was something my dad said to me, and I now just think about it. He very early on, he says, "You're not a victim. You're a survivor. Just remember that."
Yeah.
That's also something that helps me get on with this. Is that you've done it, you've got through it, and to do that was a big thing for me. This year, it's not just about me. This year, I have decided that it's about raising, more importantly, a massive awareness if I can, and some money towards charity, towards the Irish Heart Foundation. The push is to do Tully Mountain in Connemara, County Galway, on the 5th, 6th. You have to remind me now.
Sunday, June 5th, 2022.
So on Sunday, June 5th, the idea is to climb Tully Mountain. It's a sponsored hike for anybody who wants to sponsor me. The goal is €1,000. I know it's optimistic, but in this game, you have to be. When you learn to walk, you don't do it for feckin' nothing. So,
go on.
I think I'll be able to do it. Again, the dog's coming and Connor, so I have my team. I have my backup. I have my team, and we're going to try and document this as much as possible too. So. It'll be warmer, I hope, and not as misty as Derry Bond Mountain in Glendalough. That was quite a misty day. And weirdly enough, booked myself into a really nice hotel because it's also my 30th birthday that weekend. So
that's great.
If I need to sleep for 14 hours, I'll be doing it in comfort when we come back. yeah. Or I'll go to the spa or something. I don't know. But yeah, that's the goal is to ultimately raise awareness. The money's just a token for charity. I think that's important, and it's also to get the attention of the Irish Heart Foundation because that's who the money's going towards.
Do they know about this for now?
I think I think they do know about it. I have tagged them a few times in a couple of posts. I think they do know about it, but I think we don't see eye to eye on the campaign. The Irish Heart Foundation, they for some reason want to stick with their fast campaign, and that's fine. That's on them. But
they don't want the Be Fast?
No, they're not into the Be Fast, which is a pity. So I'm out here doing this by myself. So I'm
trying to hold back over here.
I know I have had words with them, maybe quite angry.
Is there any bait? Let's play devil's advocate.
Not particularly.
Is there a reason why?
No, not particularly. No, it's just
because it's balance,
eyes,
and eyes. It's not like
It's not a whole new algorithm that needs to be learned off. So I don't personally understand it. I think it's just what change is quite difficult in Ireland. I don't know if you've noticed that. It's quite a difficult thing. And I think that's part of the problem. It's institutionalized. But I also, which is an unfortunate thing to say, you know, when I have talked about where these campaigns are supposed to be pushed, they're a victim of not really pushing these campaigns in the right place too. So I'm not, it's not that I'm not concerned. It's just that I think they could be doing more in the right places and they're not. And the reason it doesn't bother me too much that they don't agree with my campaign is because I think ultimately I hope to fill the gap that they're not. So
yeah,
I don't want to compete with them. I don't want to try and drawing them out. I just want to fill the gap that they're not. And that's for our generation online on social media where we use it.
Yeah. I agree.
And not Facebook.
And also just doing things independently, sometimes it is a little bit better where you're taking matters into your own hands.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm passionate about it. I've gone through it. I think the balance and ice things. I often wonder if those paramedics knew about Be Fast, would they have argued?
They wouldn't have. No.
Yeah, exactly. I really don't think they would have. So,
why is it the Irish Heart Foundation and not the Stroke? Is there one?
They did have. So most strokes are cardiovascular.
I see. Okay.
They're caused by an issue with regards to, so, you know, your
I would have
arteries.
thought there would be like a separate like charity for strokes.
There's not, unfortunately.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it falls under the Irish Heart Foundation, and I don't know if you've looked at my logo on the stroke awareness project. It's the brain on the heart, and I think that's really important. That's something I think they perhaps overlook a little bit, is that people don't realize it's a brain injury. I mean, I remember saying to my parents, one of them, I can't remember which one of them, you know, I was like, you know, I've suffered a brain injury. And I was, well, how did that happen? Do you know, you had a stroke. How did you get the brain injury? You know,
I know.
Because people don't see that.
Yes.
It's an acquired brain injury. It's called a stroke because it strikes you. But it's a brain injury. Yeah. It's an acquired brain injury. Normally caused by something else.
Yes.
Like, you know, my diagnosis is not stroke. It's a vertebral artery dissection that caused a brain injury. Okay. So I think, while yes, it is important that people say, yeah, okay, he's had a stroke. I think our understanding of what a stroke is also a little bit misguided in Ireland.
For sure.
So with regards to the Irish Heart Foundation, it would be great to see something branched off by itself for strokes. But I think the reason why it falls under them is because most strokes, like, you know, they're cardiovascular issues normally that, you know, that cause that. And a lot of people who have cardiovascular issues, whether they have high cholesterol or whatever, they do, unfortunately, their risk factors for stroke are quite high. Okay. You take in high blood pressure, which is cardiovascular, high cholesterol, cardiovascular. They're two massive. You know, actually, high blood pressure is the leading cause of an ischemic stroke. You know, so those issues are there, and they do fall under cardiovascular. But I think because it's the Irish Heart Foundation in Ireland, a lot of people forget the fact that they're brain injuries. Yeah. So the Stroke Awareness Project aims to shine a light on all of it, not just one part of it.
Of course not. And fair play to you, despite these differences in putting ego aside and still raising money and giving it to them. I understand how disheartening it can be, and props, honestly, like, it goes to you. I'm not one to kiss ass.
Thank you.
So fucking fair play to you, honestly. I really hope that this podcast helps spread awareness a little bit for anyone who is listening. If you have any say whatsoever that can influence the change going from fast to Be Fast, or if you have a little bit of money aside that you can put into this thing, June 5th, 2022, he's going to climb up 1,000 euros. Come on, Maltese people, cop on as well, because we are also a little bit behind on that kind of stuff. Andy, you're fucking terrific. Honestly, you're terrific. I'm so happy that you're here right in front of us, and it was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. I think, and it's something I've said to loads of people, anyone can do it. It's inside of all of us.
It is.
You just have to want it.
Keep going, honestly. I appreciate anyone who's listening. Don't take anything for granted, and don't take anyone for granted.
And the Stroke Awareness Project is there for anybody who wants to reach out on Instagram. Any more questions, go for it.
Chat to him. He's great.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Longer Days Collective.